1, 2, testing the translation. One, two, three, four. Testing the English version. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Recording in progress.
Bueno, muy buenos días, señores accionistas.
Good morning, shareholders. Welcome to this extraordinary general meeting of shareholders, the Colombian Securities Exchange 2022. I'm going to hand over to Mauricio Rosillo, the president of our board of directors, who will be in charge of this meeting. Thank you very much, Mr. Cordova. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to everybody, and especially to all of our shareholders who have joined us in this meeting. A very warm welcome to this extraordinary meeting, which is very important and relevant to the Colombian Securities Exchange, as well as the whole Latin American market. We would like to especially thank you for joining this meeting, and Mr. Cordova, I would like to formally start this meeting of the Colombian Securities Exchange. Please, Mr. Vergara, could you let us know if we have achieved quorum? Good morning to everybody. I allow myself to inform you that at the start of this meeting, there are 51,500,000 ordinary shares of the total number of shares, which corresponds to 85.11% of the Colombian Securities Exchange capital, meaning that we have achieved quorum. In addition, we would like to inform you that as we are currently under the sanitary emergency, it was necessary to hold this meeting virtually, and I will briefly tell you how the voting platform will work. We are using a platform designed to allow shareholders to register and participate in a meeting and vote. It is necessary that you have a good internet connection, and you should also take into account that there may be some brief delays in sound and image, and we would appreciate your understanding. When you register, you are authorizing the Colombian Securities Exchange to use your personal data for all purposes allowed by law. And on the platform where you registered as a shareholder, you can also join the voting system and join the Zoom meeting and participate in the meeting using a separate window. Well, the meeting is underway. It's important that you keep the Zoom meeting open and also another tab with the voting system open. Voting is only possible using the platform. If you wish to ask a question at any point of the meeting, you should use the raise hand function of the Zoom interface. Shareholder participation has been authorized using both camera and microphone if necessary. And the chair of the meeting will decide who is allowed to participate, and participation will be for a maximum of 5 minutes, and no shareholder may participate more than once on the same topic. Shareholders should identify themselves with their full name or the name of the shareholder that they are representing. On the voting platform, there are two sections. The voting panel, where you can see all of the active voting processes. You should select the shareholder that you are representing. And you can also use the chat function if you require any technical support during the meeting. The voting platform will be active each time the committee indicates that a vote is needed. Voting will be open for the amount of time that the meeting chair indicates. And once you have voted, if you wish to vote, you should select the option Active Votes, and that will show you the response options. To vote, you should select the name of the shareholder that you are voting for, and you will be given two options, in favor and against. If you don't select either option, it will be understood as an abstention, and the system will then ask you to confirm your voting intent. And once you have confirmed, your vote may not be modified. And if you are representing a group of shareholders for whom all of whom share the same opinion, you may select the vote for a block of shareholder option. As soon as the voting is finished, the results will be announced on the platform. If there are any technical issues on the platform, we have a contingency plan for voting using the Zoom chat function or the registered email of each shareholder. If this were to happen, we will give the relevant instructions. If there are any technical issues with Zoom that prevent the meeting from proceeding, we will activate a contingency plan using the Meet platform. And if this is necessary, we will immediately send you a link to Google Meet using the email that you registered when you registered for the meeting. Second point, assignation of the meeting chair and secretary in accordance with Article 36 of the Colombian Security Exchange Bylaws. Mauricio Rosillo Rojas. Thank you, Monica. In accordance with Article 36 of the Bylaws, and in view of Alberto Elandia's illness, the judicial secretary of the company will take over. We will proceed to read the day's agenda. Monica, please would you proceed to read the meeting agenda? Verification of quorum. Number 2, assignation of the meeting chair and secretary. 3, reading of the day's agenda. 4, assignation of the scrutination committee to revise and approve any decisions. 5, the presentation of the integration project, which will include the agreement between shareholders, the exchange rate, fairness opinion, business case, process results, due diligence, all of which have been undertaken by the 3 exchanges. 6, consideration and approval of the integration project between the Colombian Securities Exchange, the Santiago Stock Exchange, and the Lima Stock Exchange, including the swap rate proposed by the Board of Directors and managers, according to the recommendations of consultants which were contracted for this purpose. 7, consideration and approval of the statutory reforms. 8, authorization from the Board of Directors and management and legal representatives of their acceptance, and that BBC can continue with the integration project and publish the relevant documents and take all measures necessary and convenient to achieve this integration project. Equally, all relevant information has been published on the BBC website, and we inform shareholders that the exchange has a mechanism in place which will allow you to follow the meeting using the link published on our website, which will allow you to watch and listen to the meeting in real time. Thank you, Monica. We would like to submit the agenda for your approval. Shareholders, from now, at this moment, voting is open. Please go to the voting platform and select the Verify Active Vote option. Monica, please would you give us the results of the vote? This decision has been approved by 89.55% of the shareholders present at the meeting. Thank you very much. Please continue to read the next point on the agenda. 4, designation of the Commission in charge of approving the decision. A commission must be assigned to study and approve any decisions taken, which the committee will be made up of Ana Maria Palacios from the Health Foundation, Carlos Ardana from Bancolombia, and other shareholders, as well as Christian Cruz from Credicorp Capital Fiduciaria. We would like to ask that you approve these committees. Please proceed to vote. Right now, voting is open. Please don't forget to click on the Verify Active Vote button. Shareholders, we are going to close voting. We would ask the Secretary to please tell us the results of this vote. This decision has been approved by 90.42% of the participating shareholders, excluding abstentions. We also confirm that this was accepted and that the Scrutiny Committee has been approved. Thank you very much, Monica. Please continue to read the next item on the day's agenda. Fifth point, presentation of the integration project between the Lima Stock Exchange, Santiago Exchange, and Colombian Securities Exchange. This includes the integration framework, the swap rate, the result of the fairness opinion with regard to the swap rate, the business case, and results of the due diligence process, which has been conducted by all three exchanges. All of this information has been available since December 2021 on our website. Okay, thank you. This is a very, very relevant topic. And before handing over to Mr. Cordova, I would like to emphasize the strategic importance of this project, which we are about to present. It's imperative for the sustainability of the capital markets in all three countries, and logically, and obviously in the Colombian case. And as I'm sure you'll understand, this is the work of a number of years in search of this objective, which we are presenting to you today. I would like to hand over to Juan Pablo Cordova, President of the Colombian Securities Exchange, so that he presents this integration project between the Colombian Securities Exchange and the Santiago Exchange and the Libra Exchange. Please go ahead, Juan Pablo. Thank you very much, Mauricio. And once again, I would like to welcome all shareholders. I'm going to briefly introduce the project and then talk about how the holding will be structured, the nucleus of the integration. As we mentioned, all of the supporting documentation of this decision at the meeting have been available for shareholders. And we're just going to summarize these documents, which will allow us to clearly make decisions, allow shareholders to clearly make decisions at this meeting. As Mauricio already said, this is the work of a number of years. From the start of the Latin American integrated market, our objective was to grow our market. It's a path that we have followed at the Colombian Securities Exchange, and especially with a view to integration. And this is something we've been working on for 3 years, since 2018. And many of the decisions that have been taken have been communicated to the market. And we've now reached this point where we want shareholders to participate in the decision-making process to allow us to continue with the integration process. Management we're firm in management. This is the best path for BBC to follow. There's no doubt this is the way to grow our markets, to join with our peers, because together we can search for greater opportunities for the market, whether that's with issuers, intermediaries, and joining forces, joining the three organizations together will allow us to achieve a better future for our organizations and especially for our markets. The integration of the exchanges, Bogotá, Medellin, and Occidente, has worked really well. The company's been a successful company. The investments that we've made have been very successful, very favorable for our shareholders. And the exchange continues to be a sustainable company and a profitable company. However, market evolution in recent years, especially since 2014, has not allowed us to fully develop our corporate activities and especially to cover all participants in the market. And we believe that for shareholders, for issuers, for intermediaries, for them to participate and benefit from the market, the best path to follow is integration. And integration, what we aim to do with this integration is to achieve new growth dynamics in all the markets, especially in terms of attracting new issuers, new investors to our markets, and to generate greater liquidity. The integration will allow us to also offer a better value offer to the market, to harmonize processes, rules, reduce costs, and achieve greater synergies for all participants in the market. And so I would newly like to say that this is the best path for BBC to follow, and we hope that you agree with us and approve this decision. I will hand over now to Dr. Diego so that he can tell you about what we've been working on and submit for your consideration this integration project. And I will be back later to talk about the integration framework. Thank you very much, Mr. Córdoba. Good morning to all shareholders. As Mr. Rosillo mentioned, we're going to briefly summarize the information which has already been duly published. And what we hope to do is to show shareholders that the work of the past 3 years, accompanied by high-level international consultants, has led to this integration project. And we're going to start by telling you, summarizing the merits of integration and what is the strategic rationale that allows us to create a solid base and take additional steps towards integration. The first thing that we thought about is what's the strategic rationale and the reason for integrating these markets. If we don't do any market-facing activities, the work will be incomplete. And that's why you will see on the first part of this slide, the depth and development of the market section. What we hope to do is, number one, creating a common market with access to all listed securities in all of the 3 markets, creating just one same marketplace and putting together 3 exchanges with a portfolio of products which complement each other and allow us to grow together. And this portfolio of products, this great, much larger portfolio of products, will allow us to leverage the trading, the post-trade, the settlement platforms, to integrate them all together and find benefits for the entire value chain. All of these market-facing activities, how do we achieve them? And this is the second part of the integration of all 3 companies has a very strategic purpose. And the corporate and shareholder integration, everything that is connected to the regional holding, will be presented to us later by Mr. Córdoba. But this is really where we see what we're hoping to achieve long term. And it will be much simpler for us to achieve this together. The next slide shows the exercise that we conducted in conjunction with an expert consultancy firm with regional experience. And the exercise, the very detailed exercise, included different market participants from brokers, investors, issuers, regulators, shareholders, and others. The consultancy included hundreds of interviews in all countries, included 70 interviews with participants in all of the markets to identify what the benefits were for all groups of interest. And we quickly saw that the best way was to integrate the companies. And for example, in the case of brokers in all 3 countries would be able to have access to multiple markets and multiple securities, for example. This will improve costs and infrastructure access. We have a diversified portfolio of products. And so intermediaries and brokers will be able to widen their scope in the market. And if we look at investors, investors will find just one access point to the whole market. And later on, we'll talk about what it will really mean to achieve that level of integration. We'll have standardized conditions, as Juan Pablo mentioned. We'll have operational agreements and agreements across international standards when billing for services. And lastly, investors are also going to find improved liquidity conditions and more mature market in all three countries. Issuers. A pain point for issuers, as we mentioned at the beginning of this meetings, is that acting independently in each of the markets means the integration means having access to more investors with a greater appetite for investment. And this has a lot to do with the liquidity that shareholders are hoping to achieve in a much more dynamic market. And they will find investors that will improve company valuations. Regulators, over the last 3 years, we've had a number of meetings and sessions with regulators, central banks, finance ministries, and supervisors. And clearly, in all three countries, the benefits of the integration are clear. And the essence of this is that there will be a regulatory and supervisory environment towards regulatory change that benefits the markets in the future. And in the future, regulators will be able to achieve a good level of synergy and alienation. Our shareholders in all three countries need to see a growth profile, a more diversified portfolio, value creation that we'll see later in the sense that how will each of the three companies individually compare with the integrated group. And finally, our collaborators. This is about our human talent. And what we're seeing here is that by integrating all three countries, the growth opportunities to work for and grow within the company will be much greater. There'll be much greater. The opportunities for all of our employees will be much greater. On the following slide, we're going to show you a little of the structure so that you know a little bit more about which companies were included in the valuation process, and which of the companies in each country will form part of the new regional holding company. In the case of Colombia, the companies from the capital market were included. The securities exchange, 100% of the securities exchange. The clearinghouse, 57%. The depository, Decival, 100% of that. Precia, the price provider and valuation provider in the Colombian market, 100%. And in the set ICAP case, the participation was 50%. These are the companies that form part of the valuation and that will become, that later on we will see their swap rate. In the case of Peru, the Lima exchange, 100%. Cavalli, the Peruvian depository, 98%. And then two companies, Datatec and EDB, that the Lima exchange has ownership of. So that's 50% of Datatec, as you can see here, and 28% of EDB. Now, in the Chilean case, there are three important companies. The Santiago exchange, 100%. 98% in CCLV, and DCV, which is the depository, the Chilean depository, where the Santiago exchange holds a 23% holding. That's so that you understand the package of companies that will form part of the regional holding in the model that we will show you later. And it's very important that in terms of integration, the ownership structure guarantees the strategic alignment in a transition model. The regional holding company has Chilean jurisdiction. We will explain more about that later. And in the transition period, the board of directors, corporate governance of the regional holding company will have 16 members, of which 15 come from the three companies in the same relationship as the swap rate, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And there will also be a seat for a shareholder in each of the three countries, a common shareholder. What we agreed initially was that this common shareholder, so that we don't take one seat away from each country, this is the 16th seat, which completes the seats on the board. And we also made an agreement on how corporate governance will work in each local company. The local companies, the operational companies, will continue to operate. Their boards will continue to function with 7 directors. 4 of them will be representatives of the regional holding companies or from the company management, and 3 of them will be representatives of the market, will be independent representatives of the market. This, what we're trying to do with this is guarantee equilibrium in decision making and achieve participation of independent members. This next slide, as I mentioned just before, regional jurisdiction went through a selection process with the help of an expert firm, Felipe Carrizosa, that is present in each of the 3 companies. And they used an interesting methodology that allowed us to analyze the variables that you can see up on the screen: perception and international rankings, tax in each country, exchange rate aspects, regulatory aspects. Each of these variables was assigned a weighting, and each had a number of criteria for a total of 52 criteria. And once we'd completed this activity with all of these details with the consultancy, we concluded, as you can see on the screen, that Chile obtained 81.8% of the vote, Peru 67.8% of the vote, Colombia 64.6% of the vote. So we took the decision to continue with the regional holding company being headquartered in Chile. And we'll talk more about these aspects later. And this is the next slide, please. And each individual valuation of each exchange, an investment bank was engaged to value each of the exchanges: an international investment bank, Rothschild and Company. And this investment bank spent a number of months working based on traditional valuation methodologies. Nothing different to what any investment bank would do. They looked at projected cash flow, discounted cash flow. They compared multiple comparable companies. And so the hard work here was really collecting and delivering the information to the investment banks so that they were able to independently work and produce a series of valuation ranges, which we'll talk about later. What else was done by the consultancy? The 3 exchanges reached an agreement that would be key to continuing. And what you can see on this table, which is growth and agreed growth and income, we based ourselves on the historical performance of each of the exchanges in each of the 3 countries. And as you can see here, for example, in the case of the Santiago exchange, each of their businesses, exchange, clearinghouse, depository, you can see their average historical growth rate and their projected growth rate, their agreed growth rate, 2020 to 2025. Each country had a different growth rate. Each of the markets has a different level of maturity. And what we did was we agreed that the growth rates for the next 5 years would be a fundamental variable for the investment bank, and that these would be growth rates that would include historical growth rates and also, of course, other initiatives which will be developed in the future that would form part of the valuation of the integrated company that we'll have a look at later. And this was a very important step. The three companies would be in agreement in using these projected growth rates. And I'm not going to talk about the business case here, but that was also an important variable. Another important variable was the discount rate used to discount the flows. The banker did their work here completely independently. We just want to highlight this slide, which is a very important part of the valuation. And that the discount rates in each country were very different. Chile, 9.7, Peru, 11.1, Colombia, 12.6. These are discount rates that to the 31st of March 2021, which was the date on which the valuation was based. So we have some growth rates which have been agreed, some discount rates which were agreed by the banker according to their criteria. And what you can see on this slide are the results of the valuation. I'll go from left to right on the slide. The investment bank suggested some valuation ranges in local currency that you can see up on the screen now. Colombia, 850 to 940 billion Colombian pesos. Lima, 476 to 531 million Peruvian soles. And in the case of Santiago, between 178 and 198 million Chilean pesos. And we took this range into account and we converted everything to the international currency, the dollar in this case. We looked at a number of different positions of the dollar against the local currency at the 31st of March 2021, and this gave you the value, which you can see up on the screen here, which gave Colombia a value of $248 million US, Chile $258 million US, and Peru $138 million US. And then Peru, in the case of Peru and Chile, there was an adjustment which will be explained a little bit more later at the values which are up on the screen now. Peru, $14 million, Chile, $10 million. And these are cash flow reductions which will be achieved by extraordinary dividend disbursements before the merger. And so we ended up with a situation in which Chile and Colombia ended up with values of $248 million and Peru a value of $124 million and a 20% participation in the swap rate. And this allowed us to also reach agreement, an additional agreement between the three countries to take the next step and agree this swap rate and create the integrated company. And what we wanted to do, supported by all of the work which was done by Bain & Company, that helped us to calculate high-level synergies from these integration activities. And all of these integration activities, synergies are created in terms of costs, integration, income, very important. There are all sorts of synergies, and all of them benefit the company. And so what we did was we worked together with Bain & Company to calculate these synergies. And with Rothschild, we worked again, and they applied their valuation methodology to the integrated company. And so based on this, excuse me, this is just the very basic scenario. I just want the shareholders to know that we worked on a number of different scenarios, but this baseline scenario started with the sum of individual value of each of the independent companies. This sum is $620 million, and that was our baseline. We then calculated all of the estimated synergies, which we calculated to be around $230 million. And there's another additional calculation, which is very common in this type of activity, which is nothing new, nothing different to what has happened in other countries. In these integrations, part of the synergy is returned to the market. How is it returned to the market? It could be through tariff models, commercial packages, and this is a topic which we'll talk about later, but there's always a component which is about returning to the market some of the synergies which can be obtained in the long term. If we are able to, if we look at the net synergies, the value is $144 million, which is the difference between $230 million and discounting the devolution, and then the value of the integrated company using the same methodology that we used for the individual valuations. We reach a value for the integrated company of $764 million, which is a 23% increase in value compared to the sum of the values of each of the three individual companies. And this is a very important value added. And this value added could be between 13 and 26%, depending on a number of different factors, but this gives us a good buffer to present the integrated company to our shareholders. And very quickly, as I said at the beginning, we worked very, very hard to understand these synergies in terms of expenses, operations, and you can study this in the published documentation. There's a huge amount of detail about the time frame in which these synergies will be achieved. As I said, synergies in terms of expenses, capex, technology investment. There's also a very, very interesting calculation in terms of more participants, greater volume, larger portfolio of products. And the final part of this slide talks about the investment that's required for integration. We estimate it to be in around $43 million in everything, all of the work which is required to integrate the three markets. And this investment is part of valuation, which was calculated in the $730 million from the previous slide. This is the whole package. If we look at the whole package, it's a very, very positive financial package. We conducted another exercise, the fairness opinion, or the opinion of an independent third party of the valuation which I've just presented to you. So the Colombian Securities Exchange contracted Invalink, a local investment bank, well known with a strong domestic and international track record, and they gave us an independent opinion of the valuation. And I'm going to read their conclusion to you. Invalink considers that the methodologies, the rates, and the results of the valuation are reasonable. And this opinion supported the Rothschild study, which was done for us by Rothschild over a number of months. Let's continue. In terms of the individual valuation slide that I showed you, where Chile and Colombia both have 40% and Peru has 20%. This is just a little bit more detail, as we detailed in the business case, how each share in each of the companies will be swapped. So in the case of Colombia, 100% of the shares will be swapped for 40% of the holding shares. In the Chilean case, the same, 100% of the shares will be swapped for 40% of the shares in the regional holding companies. And as I mentioned previously, there will also be an extraordinary dividend in local currency, which will be distributed by the Santiago Exchange so that their swap ratio will be exactly the same as Colombia's. And the same formula was applied to Peru, where 100% of their shares will be swapped for 20% of the shares in the holding company. And there'll also be an extraordinary dividend and or a capital reduction equivalent to approximately 49 million Peruvian soles. And this is the text that summarizes the swap rate, how it will be specifically to guarantee this 40-40-20 share between each country. In addition, each of the three exchanges conducted due diligence, which was outsourced to Deloitte. Deloitte worked on four large aspects of due diligence in each of the three countries: financial, tributary, labor, and legal. And the conclusions, summary of the conclusions was that Deloitte did not find any significant risks to the transaction. This was a positive result to the due diligence work by this firm, this internationally recognized firm. Okay, Mr. Cordova, I will hand over to you again so that we can talk about the regional holding company structure. Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you very much, Diego. Thank you. I see that there are a couple of questions in the chat and a couple of hands which are up. As soon as we finish the presentation, in just a moment, we will give you the opportunity to ask questions and resolve any doubts that you may have. As you can see in the documents which have been delivered to you, the integration itself will be conducted by using a share swap, and this would allow each of the shareholders to decide whether they participate in the share swap. So that the integration goes ahead, we need at least 50% plus one of the shareholders or the shares in the company to allow the regional holding company to have control over the Colombian Securities Exchange and its branches. So we need at least, and so we have a integration framework agreement. This is a document which, it's a legal document which the shareholders will sign. It's an agreement between the shareholders in each of the three companies in which they commit that if the conditions of integration are met, as have been described in the integration model, they're obliged to participate in the share swap as soon as the authorities approve this. So this is really the way of achieving the regional holding companies through a share swap, which each of our shareholders will participate in by which they will, an agreement which they'll enter into by signing this agreement. So that individual shareholders, for example, people with a smaller shareholding, what we've thought is that it's not necessary that they sign the framework, but that they join an adhesion agreement so that at the end of the process, each of these shareholders have had the opportunity to participate in this process. And as Diego's just described to us, the 40% that corresponds to the Colombian Securities Exchange will include whatever happens, 100% of the current shares in the Colombian Securities Exchange. And so that Colombia has 40% of the holding company, 100% of the shareholders and shares must be included. One of the aspects of the integration framework and the adhesion agreements, which will be published in time for everybody to participate. I'm going to move on to describing how we're going to construct this regional holding company. It's not actually an international merger because of the complexities that would involve. So what we're doing is conducting the process using a share swap. And so we've chosen a jurisdiction, which was suggested to us by an independent third party, and Chile was identified as the best jurisdiction within which to operate, and we have to operate according to the rules and regulations of Chile. So the first step is that the Value Commission, the Chilean exchange, in conversation with the other exchanges, proposed that the regional holding company would take ownership of the exchanges and that the Santiago Exchange, which is a very well-known and regulated company, would lead the process. The first step is that the Santiago Exchange will be divided into two companies. The first, the new company, which eventually will become the regional holding company, and the other company, which will operate the securities business, the stock business. And so the Santiago Exchange will be divided into two, one which will focus solely on trading activities, and the other part, around about 80%, will be the part of the Santiago Exchange, which then becomes part of the regional holding company. So that's the first step. The second step is the creation of a new vehicle in Chile that the Colombian and Peruvian shareholders will contribute their shares to, and as will the Chilean shareholders. So the shareholders from all three companies will be contributing to this holding. We've called it an intermediary holding. And this is a step which is needed because of a technical step related to valuation and other aspects. But this will be an intermediary step where we will place our shares. All of the shareholders will place our shares in and create this intermediary holding company. And then in the third step, this intermediary holding company, which was created in Chile, will merge with the new company created by the Santiago Exchange to then create the regional holding company, which will be the owner of the Santiago Securities Exchange, the BVL Group and all of its companies, and the Colombian Securities Exchange and all of its subsidiaries. In the relationship which we've already mentioned, 40% for Santiago, 20% for Lima, and 40% for the Colombian Securities Exchange and its shareholders. And once again, so that to ensure that these percentages are respected, we do need the contribution of 100% of our shares and shareholders. And this is how the regional holding company will be created. And this is all clearly explained in the integration framework and all of these steps. And all shareholders which sign the agreement will be committing to make the contributions to this Chilean holding companies, which will be created, and then vote in favor of the integration to create the regional holding company. This is the path, which might seem a little bit complex, but all of the lawyers we've spoken to, all of the lawyers that we've contracted in each of the three companies, especially in Chile, have concurred that this is the path to follow that will actually end up most rapidly creating the regional holding company. On the next slide, we're going to have a look at the chronogram. So what we can see here is in January, we're holding these shareholder meetings. Santiago's held their meeting last Wednesday. The shareholders voted in favor of integration. Today, we're here with the Colombian Securities Exchange, and tomorrow the Lima Exchange will be voting as well. And we will then have the approval of all shareholders, and we will then move on to the next stage, which will be the signing of the integration framework, so that all shareholders that want to participate and that need to participate, that need to accompany us in February and in March. And then all of the processes will begin in each of the three companies, where in the case of Chile, obviously the activities are a little more extensive because of the process of creating the regional holding itself, that as I just described to you. The idea is that this process should take around 6 or 7 months, going through the processes of authorization, and in July or August, we should have the regional holding company set up. And if everything works out as it should do, it should be completed by then. Obviously, all of this is subject to regulatory oversight. We have no control over the time taken by regulators. This is the chronogram that we've proposed. It might be a little bit optimistic, but we do believe it's doable and achievable. However, I should note that all of this is subject to regulatory oversight, especially in the case of Chile. Colombia needs a bylaw to be issued to allow a decree was issued a couple of weeks ago that allows all of our shareholders to sign these agreements, these swap agreements, to substitute the Colombian shares for the regional holding company shares. And in addition, this allows the regional holding company to become a shareholder, a 10% shareholder in the Colombian Securities Exchange. So in Colombia, the regulatory side of things has been resolved, and this allows us to, in all confidence, sign and join and participate in this framework agreement. And so, as Mauricio mentioned and Diego mentioned, the creation of this company is not just to create the regional holding company, but also to create a unified market, achieve the huge synergies that we will be able to achieve by creating this unified market. And this generates a separate chronogram. Carlos, please. And so this is a series of activities which takes us right through 2022 and 2023. We'll be starting in this quarter with all of these meetings, and then we will begin all of the work to define what the negotiation model will be, the clearing and settlement model will be, so that we can deliver to the market as quickly as we can the benefits of this integration. We anticipate that we're going to be doing this throughout 2022 and 2023. So the holding company should really begin their activities in the third quarters of 2022, but the market, the benefits for the market, the benefits that we're presenting to shareholders today of all of these new processes will be fully realized and achievable by the end of 2023. So we still have 2 years ahead of us, of hard work ahead of us, but we believe that this is worth it. It's worth it for all participants in the market and for all of our countries. And so this really is where we reach the end of our presentation. All of the documentation is available, especially the integration framework agreement. All of those documents have been published, and we'll be talking to all of the shareholders that decide that they want to sign the agreement to resolve any doubts that they have, anything else. And so hopefully by the end of February, we will have 50% plus one of the shares and shareholders in agreement with the framework. And I would like to now hand over to anybody who has any doubts that they would like me to resolve. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Córdoba. Right now, we would like to invite you to submit any questions that you have. We would like to thank you and remind you of the need to clearly identify yourself, whether that's your own name or the name of the shareholder that you're a representative. We have Mr. Diego Camargo. Please go ahead. Good morning. Good afternoon now. My name is Diego Camargo. I have a doubt around the risks of this integration. If we look at the political instability that right now we can see, mostly in Chile, a little bit in Peru, and I'd just like to know if you took this into account as one of the possible risks of integration, and within the market capitalization, if that was something that was included. Thank you very much. Thank you, Diego. Thank you very much. Well, of course, yes, of course, the political environment in each of our countries is a factor, is a risk factor. It's also could be an opportunity, depending on the environment. in a process like this one. We've spoken about it among colleagues in each of the three countries, obviously, and we are convinced that this is a long-term strategy, and this is not something that we cannot allow the local short-term politics to affect our long-term decision-making and activities. And none of the three countries is free of risk. And within the region has been characterized by political volatility, especially in recent years. And so, in spite of those scenarios, we are convinced, all of us who have participated in the process are convinced, not just management, but the boards of directors in each of the three countries which are represented and their shareholders. We consider that we should move forward with the efforts to construct a better market for each of the three countries and the market, and we shouldn't stop the process because of that. And so, within the context of the regulatory framework today, we believe that we should move forward. Mr. Cordova, we also have Daniel Gomez. Daniel, please go ahead. Hello. Good morning to everybody. Daniel Gomez, representing the Porvenir Funds. Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Cordova. Just one doubt. I think something which was a little bit lost was in the event that we have all of the approval in the meeting, is there any more detail? Is there anything more micro about the detail around signing this agreement, this shareholder agreement, or is what we have today is that we should just wait for you to get in touch with us all? No, Daniel, thank you very much for that question. It's very important. The idea is that during February, we'll be having conversations with all shareholders that want to join us, and we'll be starting tomorrow. The idea is that the decision, which will happen in Santiago at the beginning of March, includes the agreements which have been signed in all three countries. And so in Colombia, we should be prepared for that date, the first days of March, with all of our agreements signed. And the idea is that we will start very soon this work with all of our shareholders. And the idea is that from tomorrow, we'll start talking to each of our shareholders with a view to, by the end of February, the very, very latest, the first days of March, to achieve all of the framework agreements by that date. I think there's another question. There's another question in the chat about tax and the tax jurisdiction, and I think it is important. I'd like to clear this up for everybody. In the first instance, the share swap in Colombia for the shareholders in the Colombian Securities Exchange does not have any tax impact because it's a share which is listed on the Colombian Securities Exchange. Any capital gains which are generated will be exempt from income tax. And so in the swap, there's no tax burden or capital gains tax. As the Colombian shareholders become shareholders in the Chilean holding company, we may be subject to tax. The Chilean and the Colombian tax regimes. The Chilean tax regime is more favorable than the current Colombian regime. In Colombia, the tariff is 35% and 10% on dividends. And so that gives us an end result of somewhere around 38-39%. In Chile, the complete burden between company and shareholder is 35%. So dividends will be subject to lower tax. Dividends from the holdings in Chile will be subject to lower taxes. And in terms of transactions, operational transactions between each of the companies will continue to operate and conduct business in each of the countries, and obviously their business in each of the countries will be subject to tax. In terms of the shareholders, there's no capital gains tax, and the dividends which will be paid by the regional holding company will be subject to a lower tax burden because they come from a Chilean holding company as compared to the current Colombian company. I think that's all of the doubts and uncertainty. Is there any other doubt? Shareholders, I'd like to invite you please to raise your hands if you have any doubts. I don't see any hands raised. No, we have no more questions, Mr. President. That's very good. Okay, well, in that case, please, Monica, as we've now cleared up all the doubts that our shareholders have shared with us, we would like to, I'd like you to read the next point of order. Thank you, President. Number 6, consideration and approval of the integration project between the Colombian Securities Exchange, and BVL Group, including the swap rate proposed by the Board of Directors, according to the recommendations of consultants engaged to conduct this process. Okay, thank you, Monica. Let's go ahead and read. Having listened to Mr. Cordoba's presentations, we need to submit for the approval of shareholders the integration of the 3 exchanges and the swap rate proposed by the Board of Directors and management. And right now, it's very important to indicate, as we told you in the presentation, it's to go ahead. It's very important to bear in mind that 50% plus 1 of our shareholders need to approve the process for it to proceed. It's important to remember that the integration project was approved on the 26th of January at the Santiago Stock Exchange at the AGM, and tomorrow we hope it will be achieved as well during the AGM at the Lima Exchange. So thank you very much, Monica. We would like to move forward and vote on the integration project. Right now, the voting is open. Please go to the voting platform and click the button to verify active votation. We are now going to close voting. Any shareholders who still have yet to vote, please quickly cast your vote. Okay, we can now close the voting, Mr. Rosillo. Okay, so the voting has now closed. Please, Secretary, would you give us the results of the vote? Yes. Right now, we can confirm that the vote has been approved by 81.81% of the shareholders present at the meeting, Thank you very much, shareholders, for this vote of confidence, which is a huge step and very important step towards the integration of the exchanges and markets in our countries. Monica, please would you read the next point on the agenda? 7, consideration and approval of the bylaw reform modification to Article 7. And so we will go ahead and have a look at so this statutory reform project proposes to create a second paragraph in Article 7 to specify that in the event that the Colombian Securities Exchange integrates with other securities exchanges, in no case cannot exceed any legally determined values on paid in capital. This legislative limitation can be found online as issued by the Colombian financial superintendents regulating beneficiaries and establishing that in the case that securities exchanges merge, that's great. Thank you, Monica, for that explanation. We would now like to submit the modification of this article to a vote, unless there are any questions or doubts on the part of any shareholders. Okay, there are no hands raised, so we can proceed to vote on this bylaw reform, and that would allow us to conduct all the activities necessary to implement this reform and submit to the financial superintendents the complete text, which will be included in one document, and therefore issue the corresponding public document. And so right now we would like to open the vote so that shareholders, the vote is active. Shareholders, please would you go to the platform and click the Verify Active Vote button. Okay, we're just about to close voting. We'll just wait a couple more seconds. Okay. So, Monica, please, would you give us the results of the vote, if you would be so kind? Yes, we confirm that this decision on the reform to the bylaws has been approved by 88.56% of the shareholders present at the meeting. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's move to read the next point on the agenda. To authorize the board of directors and management legal representatives so that within their duties they accept and conduct and execute all acts and contracts that BBC needs to achieve the integration project, to provide all documentation necessary and to take all measures necessary and relevant to achieving the integration. Monica, please go ahead. To approve the integration project between the Colombian Securities Exchange, the Santiago and Lima exchanges, the board of directors and management and legal representatives should accept that they will celebrate and execute all acts and contracts so that BBC requires to achieve the integration project. They will provide all documentation necessary and take all measures necessary or convenient to achieve the integration project. Okay, well, we would like to submit this to a vote. Okay, right now the voting is open. Please go to the voting platform and once again click the Verify Active Vote button. Shareholders, we are going to close voting in just a few seconds. Okay, the voting has closed. Monica, please would you give us the results of the vote? President, we confirm that this decision has been approved by 90.2% of the shareholders present in the meeting. Thank you, Monica. Okay, that brings us to the end of our agenda. I would like to thank all of you for joining us. Thank you for the decisions that you have made today. This is a milestone in the Colombian capital market. It's a milestone in the regional capital markets. Thank you for your trust. This without doubt will bring huge benefits to each of our economies and markets. And I'd like to especially